What's going on, Packer fans? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can follow the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. I actually got through offensive grades after one day, which never happens, but I was able to put a little extra time in on Monday and was able to get those completed. So we're going to go over those in just a moment. It's always exciting when it's a little bit closer to the previous game. But before we get there, we had a lot of injury updates from Matt LaFleur. So let's go through those one-on-one first, because there is a lot, and there's a lot of important injury updates as well. So first of all, Josh Myers, whose injury definitely looked the worst. It sounds like he is not going to, have any season-ending injury or anything like that, which is the biggest news that you want to hear. It does sound like he's going to be out at least a couple weeks. It wouldn't surprise me to see an IR stint to keep him out for a few weeks and then kind of evaluate him from there. But he is going to miss some time. But again, I think it has to be good news that this is not a season-ending injury for Josh Myers. Got some good news on David Bakhtiari. He will be ready to practice, as Aaron Rodgers kind of let loose and alluded to it in his press conference following the game. This is, of course, really good news. And listen, Bakhtiari, I'm no doctor. I'll say that up front, but he looked phenomenal in training camp and ahead of schedule the entire time. It certainly seemed like Green Bay was maybe playing a little bit cautious by putting him on the PUP list to begin the season, which, by the way, I think is the absolute smart thing to do in that situation. He sits out the first 6 weeks, of course. He's eligible to practice now. I do expect there to be some ramp up period. I would be shocked pretty darn shocked if he played this week in some capacity. I don't think that's going to happen. And then they have the short week on Thursday going to at Arizona. I don't think that is a likely scenario either. My guess is they're shooting for either the Chiefs in 3 weeks or the Seahawks in 4 weeks, one of those two games where he actually gets his first start and plays in the game. Time will tell. We'll absolutely see what happens with Bakhtiari. And listen, I would put nothing by the guy. He's just that prepared and that everything. Like he's that guy, right? He is amazing in everything he does. And it wouldn't shock me if he could go out and play 75 snaps this week and show no wear or tear. That's just kind of how David Bakhtiari is. But I expect Green Bay to continue to be cautious here. I personally think Chiefs in a few weeks seems like a really smart starting point, and maybe not doing Thursday night football or certainly this week. But who knows? Time will tell. But either way, very good news that Bakhtiari is practicing this upcoming week. Kevin King, it seems like he's more day-to-day. No injured reserve for King, which means that, he's already sat out 1 week. Means that, likely that means they're going to want him back either this week or maybe shooting for Arizona on Thursday Night Football as well. Since they didn't put him on IR already, maybe it's possible that he misses the next 2 weeks and returns after that. But it sounds like King's working hard to get back, and we'll see exactly what that means and how quickly he'll be able to. But certainly would be nice to have in there. Again, this might be a player where they give an extra week, maybe don't play him against Washington, and then have him go against Arizona, where you could definitely use him against that high-powered offense. But time will tell there as well. Jair Alexander, this was a mix of good news, bad news. Matt LaFleur did say that Jair is progressing nicely. However, he also said that they couldn't 100% rule out surgery. Remember, if he has surgery, that would end Jair Alexander's season. So they haven't been able to rule that out yet. And it sounds like there is a drop dead date. He didn't give that date or say when that is. I don't think they exactly know when that is, but there is a drop dead date at some point where they have to decide, all right, it's either time to have surgery or we're for sure not going to have surgery and try to have him come back at some point. Not reached that point yet, but you have to like the fact that they're encouraged that things are progressing, quote unquote, nicely. But we'll see. Again, this is probably the biggest, you can say elephant in the room, cloud hanging over the Packers, whatever you want to call it. Za'Darius Smith certainly in that category as well. It's going to be really tough. I'm not breaking any news here. It's going to be very tough for Green Bay to reach their goals if they don't have Za'Darius Smith and Jair Alexander. Maybe they can get away without Z, if they get enough pressure from Clark and Preston, Rashawn Gary, etc. But it's a major loss. But if they're without Z and Jair, even just Jair, it's just such an awful injury to have to, one of your top players on defense, all-pro corner. It just would be brutal. So hopefully he can come back. I don't think they're going to rush him. I think they would gladly at this point take just him being ready for the playoffs and kind of go from there. But we'll see, and hopefully this is ultimately good news for Jair. Preston Smith day to day. They'll likely give him through the week to see if he's capable of playing on Sunday. Again, then you have that short week against Arizona. So could be, I definitely see Preston wanting to push to get back because he has all those incentives. But once again, Green Bay is going to be smart with him. Darnell Savage is in concussion protocol and no update on MVS at this point. So that's where we are at from an injury standpoint. Lots of injuries. I think overall, sort of everything was to be expected. Bakhtiari practicing, no update for Jair. Preston and King day to day. Myers likely to miss some time. Savage in concussion protocol, no update on MVS. I think all of those were somewhat in the realm of reason. I think the fact that Jair's progressing nicely, Bakhtiari's practicing, Myers isn't done for the year is overall reason to celebrate following a game where we saw another batch of injuries that, again, could have crippled Green Bay going forward, but it sounds like hopefully some of those guys are going to be back sooner rather than later. All right, let's get into my offensive grades for this week. First of all, top three this week, Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones, and Mercedes Lewis. Certainly was not Aaron Rodgers' best game. He still grades out a little bit higher than everyone else. Again, being a quarterback tends to lean itself to that. Either you're going to have a pretty darn good game or a pretty bad game. Sometimes there's in between. This is a pretty average game for Rodgers at best. But still, there was a lot of things that he did well. I thought his ability to scramble, certainly on the touchdown early in the game, the quarterback sneak really helped him out in this game. I thought he made good decisions overall. Certainly some checkdowns, some screen passes that he did a nice job just kind of controlling the game. And then I thought the ball to EQ in the back of the end zone was just an absolutely gorgeous ball in a really tough situation where they're guarding the end zone tightly. You're in a third down situation, backed up, and he just throws an absolute laser perfect ball to EQ back of the end zone. That's why I was so frustrated with that penalty because, as I mentioned on a couple of radio hits on Monday, you want to see these guys make big plays and you want to see the best of the best performing every Sunday and the referees not getting in their way. And listen, if EQ chucks the guy out of the way and it's a very obvious pass interference, by all means, throw the flag. Don't celebrate an Aaron Rodgers play if EQ did something egregious and was certainly wrong on the play. You still have to take it away. I get that. But on a play where there was such little contact from EQ and on a play that would have been played on SportsCenter over and over, you got to let those things go. And especially if I posted on Twitter, there's three referees. There's the one right by it. There's one that's closest to it on the sideline. And then there's one that's far back on the sideline. One closest, or over here, says incomplete pass, which I don't know what they're looking at. The one that's on the far sideline, that's at least the closer of the two, signals touchdown. The one way behind, way behind, about 5 seconds after the play, I have no idea what they're looking like. They're way behind the play, throws the flag out and calls it an OPI. Just unbelievable and again, it's just frustrating to not be able to see these top players make these amazing plays because a referee decides to take it away. Just frustrating. Same goes on the other side, right? The great touchdown run by Khalil Herbert, the phantom holding call. Again, that's a great play by Herbert. It's a play that the fans are going to get up on their feet in the stands and celebrate. You want to see good football in all phases. For the team that you're playing against, you just want to see good football, and you don't want to see refs ruin that. That's it. That's all I'm saying about that. But I thought that Rodgers throw to EQ was a gorgeous throw and certainly deserved credit there. How can you not love Aaron Jones? How can you not be romantic about football? How can you not be romantic about the way Aaron Jones is playing football? Just everything he is doing. And one of the things I really want to point out is his blitz pickup in this game was just phenomenal. He's progressed so far in that regards. Of course, he takes the check down on a pass and takes that for a touchdown. Had the gorgeous run where he makes a beautiful cut, reads the blocks perfectly, and takes it down the field. Just he's doing everything that you could possibly want. And then again, as I mentioned last week and a million times previously, he's one of the best in the NFL and NFL history at just taking small runs or negative runs and turning them into slight positives and making it 2nd and 8 instead of 2nd and 12. And those things can go unnoticed a lot of times, but just another really fantastic game from Aaron Jones. And frankly, the player I was most impressed by in this game was Mercedes Lewis. He had multiple, and I mean multiple, just phenomenal blocks as a pass protector, as a run blocker, had a couple catches in this game. He's their best tight end right now. I don't think there's any question about that. He's playing the most snaps even at his age. He's a dominant blocker. He's basically like an offensive tackle out there. He's getting a little bit more involved in the passing game this year than he has in really in previous seasons. And then he's of course a leader on the team. Everyone rallies around him. He's just phenomenal to watch. And if you get a chance, and I say this often, but just watch Mercedes Lewis block in a game sometime. And it looks like an offensive tackle at times. It is absolutely crazy how talented of a blocker that he is and how much joy you can see and he takes and just the professionalism of being a blocking tight end. He's opening things up for everyone else. He's doing the hard work, and I'm happy that I get to do this as one of the people that can, kind of scream out and say, he's just a phenomenal football player and deserves so much credit for what he's doing every Sunday. And this is just another phenomenal example of that. My bottom three graded players this week: Royce Newman, Josh Myers, and John Runyan, all the interior of the offensive line. I've really been high on Royce Newman up until this point, but a couple really brutal blitz pickups and just kind of getting manhandled a couple times, to be fair, certainly set Newman back in this game. Josh Myers started the game off really poorly, along with literally everyone else along the offensive line, which I'll get to in a moment, but he only played like 8 snaps and still was my second lowest graded player. And then John Runyan had a couple nice blocks in this game, but had this was the first inconsistent, really poor game we saw from John Runyan. He's been really consistent up until this point and certainly has earned his starting spot. This week against a good Bears front, he struggled a bit more, and it wasn't even necessarily like anything physical. It was just, just kind of some mental errors and kind of taking his foot off the gas at times. I expect him to bounce back, but definitely a little bit of a kind of come back to earth game for John Runyan. Matt LaFleur did mention that Lucas Patrick was his highest graded offensive lineman this week. I told you last week or whatever week it was that he said that, and I thankfully agreed with whoever he said at that point. Sometimes I don't see it that way. I had Elton Jenkins ranked slightly above Lucas Patrick this week. As I said then, as I will say now, I would trust Coach on this one. If Coach says Lucas Patrick was the best rated offensive lineman, by all means, go with Matt LaFleur on this one. Lucas Patrick's probably your best rated offensive lineman in this game. As I said, I had Elton Jenkins slightly ahead of Lucas, but a nice game for Lucas Patrick as well. Both of them graded in the positive. Three notes kind of from the offensive performance. Number one, overall, the protection was a mess at a lot of points in this game. The first quarter, the protection all over, running game, passing game, all of it was an absolute nightmare. Credit everyone for kind of getting back on the same page through the remainder of the game, really. But there are multiple runs, multiple passes throughout the course of this game where the protections are sliding the wrong way. Runyan literally blocked the wrong way on one play and took out Elton Jenkins on the play. There were tight end snafus. It was all of it. And, that certainly is surprising because we haven't seen that, especially from the offensive line this year. We've seen the offensive line get beat at times, but not just have complete breakdowns in protection. So that was a little bit frustrating in this game and certainly something that they're going to be happy to clean up after a win, as Matt LaFleur always likes to say. That's a loss. It's certainly much more disappointing, but I think they'll definitely learn from what Chicago did. There's one gorgeous, just beautiful play. Royce Newman. So Royce Newman is obviously next to Lucas Patrick and Billy Turner on the play, and they're lining up 3 defensive linemen. So it's Hicks, and then it's DeAndre Houston Carson, and then Khalil Mack. So Houston Carson is lined up right over him. So Newman's responsibility is Houston Carson at the snap. Houston Carson backs up, and then Hicks and Mack both beeline straight at Royce Newman. So Patrick is waiting for somebody to stunt or something, and nobody really comes, and Turner's waiting for somebody to kind of block or stunt and nobody comes. Newman's looking straight forward at Houston Carson, and again, looking to block him. He realizes quickly that Houston Carson, who's a safety, if you're not familiar, it backs up out of the play, so that's not his responsibility. And he looks up and he sees, imagine Akeem Hicks and Khalil Mack coming right at you, and you just see his head go back and forth, ridiculous of what do I do? This is not supposed to happen sort of thing. And he goes to block like Hicks, even though I think Mac is probably the better choice here. He goes to block Hicks, and then like Mac recognizes that he has a little bit of an opening, so just like chucks Newman out of the way and gets to Rodgers. But it's just this super funny image of Newman like looking at Houston Carson and then just like realizing Akeem Hicks and Khalil Mack are both coming straight at him at the same time, and just I can imagine the sheer utter panic of what you would do in that situation. I can't even imagine, but it was a very funny play. I'll try to post it on Twitter some point this week, but that was definitely one of my favorites. But I think it's definitely something they can learn from. Aaron Rodgers' deep ball continues to be an issue. A couple plays in this game where he had the opportunity to hit downfield and just couldn't. Allen Lazard had a key one where Lazard won clean on the play and Rodgers couldn't hit him. And then Robert Tonyan, just a very disappointing, and anyone who knows me knows I've been a Robert Tonyan stan from day one. He's had a very disappointing start to the season. I didn't think this was as an egregious game as it looked when I first watched it. There were a few things that Tonyan did nice in this game as well, but a couple of just real brutal blocks, trouble separating, not being able to really get anything going after the catch at any point this season, mostly because he doesn't have many catches, but just a very disappointing start to the season for Tonyan. They got to figure out a way to get him going and a little bit more active, and Tonyan just needs to do a much better job as a blocker. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. Always appreciate it. Of course, we'll be right back here tomorrow with Rachel Hotmeyer, so make sure not to miss that. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.